In the grim darkness of the far future, there exists a fate so terrible that even the most hardened warriors of the Imperium would shudder to contemplate it. Imagine being entombed within a walking sarcophagus of ceramite and adamantium, your broken body kept barely alive by life support systems that hum and wheeze with every labored breath. You are one of the Emperor's finest warriors, a space marine of the legendary Alpha Legion, interred within a dreadnought after suffering wounds that would have killed any lesser being. You have walked the battlefields of 100 worlds, your massive footfalls shaking the ground, your weapons speaking death to the enemies of mankind. But then, in one catastrophic moment, everything changes. Your systems fail, your weapons fall silent, and darkness claims you. When consciousness returns, you find yourself not in the halls of your chapter, but in the clutches of the greenskin menace. The Orks have captured you, and what follows is a nightmare that transcends the boundaries of conventional warfare. To understand the true horror of this scenario, we must first comprehend what it means to be entombed within a dreadnought. These towering war machines stand as both monuments to heroism and prisons for the living dead. When a space marine suffers mortal wounds in battle, wounds so grievous that even the advanced medical arts of the apothecaries cannot restore them to fighting condition, the chapter faces a choice. They can allow their brother to die with honor, his gene seed harvested for the next generation, or they can preserve him in a different way. The greatest heroes, those whose experience and wisdom are deemed too valuable to lose, are instead interred within the armored shell of a dreadnought. The process is neither quick nor painless. What remains of the warrior's broken body is encased in an amniotic sarcophagus, a life support cocoon that keeps flesh and brain alive through a combination of ancient technology and the warrior's own enhanced biology. The interment process begins immediately after the warrior's mortal wounds are confirmed. Apothecaries work frantically to stabilize what remains of the body, removing damaged organs that cannot be saved while preserving the brain, spinal column, and whatever other tissue might be integrated with the dreadnought systems. The warrior often remains conscious during this process, experiencing every cut and extraction as his body is systematically dismantled and prepared for its new housing. This is deliberate. The chapter's chaplains believe that maintaining consciousness during interment reinforces the warrior's identity and helps prevent the psychological dissolution that can occur when a space marine is reduced to little more than a brain in a jar. The sarcophagus itself is a marvel of ancient technology, its origins stretching back to the dark age of technology and perhaps even beyond. It maintains the warrior's biological remains in a perfect state of preservation, providing nutrients, removing waste products, and regulating temperature and pressure to optimal levels. The amniotic fluid that fills the sarcophagus serves multiple purposes. It provides physical support for the fragile organic tissue, distributes nutrients evenly, and acts as a medium for the neural connections that will link the warrior's nervous system to the dreadnought's controls. Some describe the experience of floating in this fluid as peaceful, a return to the womb. Others find it claustrophobic and unsettling, a constant reminder of how much they have lost. The mind impulse unit that connects the warrior's consciousness to the dreadnought systems is perhaps the most sophisticated component of the entire assembly. It translates neural impulses into mechanical commands with such precision that the warrior can control the dreadnought's massive limbs, as naturally as he once controlled his own arms and legs. In theory, the interface is so seamless that the warrior should not even be aware of the translation occurring. He simply thinks, "Raise left arm," and the dreadnought's arm rises. In practice, however, there is always some degree of disconnection, a faint lag between thought and action that serves as a constant reminder that the body is no longer flesh but machine. The sensory experience of piloting a dreadnought is profoundly alien to those who have known only organic existence. Visual input comes from multiple optical sensors positioned around the chassis, providing 360-degree awareness, but in a format that must be interpreted rather than simply seen. Audio input arrives as pure data, frequencies and amplitudes that the brain must convert into meaningful sound. Tactile sensation is replaced by pressure readings and stress measurements, cold numbers that approximate the feeling of touch, without ever truly replicating it. Some dreadnought pilots describe the experience as being like wearing an incredibly sophisticated suit of armor, while others liken it to being a ghost possessing a mechanical body. Neither comparison fully captures the reality of existence as a walking weapons platform. The psychological impact of interment varies tremendously from warrior to warrior and from chapter to chapter. Some embrace their new form, viewing it as an opportunity to serve the emperor for centuries, or even millennia beyond their natural lifespan. They see themselves as honored veterans whose wisdom and experience will guide future generations of their chapter. These are the venerable dreadnoughts, the ancients who are awakened for important battles or consulted when difficult decisions must be made. Their sarcophagi are covered in purity seals and honor markings, testaments to countless victories achieved over their extended service. Other dreadnoughts struggle with their transformation, mourning the loss of simple pleasures like eating, drinking, or feeling the wind on their face. They serve because duty demands it, but they do not find joy in their existence. And some, particularly among the Chaos Legions, or those who spend too long in stasis without proper maintenance, descend into madness, their minds fragmenting under the weight of isolation and sensory deprivation. Between deployments, dreadnoughts enter stasis sleep, a state of suspended animation that slows their biological processes to near zero. This is necessary because maintaining full consciousness for extended periods without the sensory input that organic existence provides leads inevitably to psychological breakdown. The stasis chambers where dreadnoughts sleep are typically located deep within a chapter's fortress monastery, in halls lined with dozens or hundreds of sarcophagi containing the sleeping forms of ancient warriors. These chambers are places of profound reverence, tended by tech, priests and guarded by the chapter's most trusted warriors. When a dreadnought is awakened from stasis, it is always for important reasons: a major battle, a crucial campaign, or a threat that requires the wisdom and experience of the ancients. The awakening process is itself traumatic. Consciousness returns gradually, systems coming online one by one as the stasis field releases its hold. The warrior often experiences confusion upon awakening, memory of why he entered stasis, mixing with awareness of current circumstances in ways that can be disorienting. He may have entered stasis during one millennium and awakened in another, finding that centuries have passed and everyone he knew is long dead. The tech, priests who perform the awakening are trained to provide orientation gently, reminding the warrior of who he is and updating him on current events. But there is only so much that can be done to ease the shock of temporal displacement. Some dreadnoughts keep careful track of dates and events, maintaining a sense of continuity across their long service. Others simply accept that they exist outside normal time, summoned from sleep when needed and return to it when their work is done. The oldest dreadnoughts, those who have served for thousands of years, often report that their human memories fade with each awakening. They can remember battles fought and victories won, but the emotional context drains away, leaving only tactical data and strategic lessons. They forget the faces of brothers they once loved, the names of enemies they once hated, the reasons why particular moments mattered to them. This gradual erosion of identity is perhaps the cruelest aspect of dreadnought existence. The warrior who entered the sarcophagus 5,000 years ago may bear little resemblance to the entity that emerges today. The core remains the essential purpose and dedication, but the human elements that once defined him have been worn away by time and trauma. What remains is something closer to a weapon that can think than to a man who happens to be housed in a weapon. Different chapters have different philosophies about dreadnought deployment and maintenance. The Ultramarines treat their dreadnoughts with extreme respect bordering on reverence, viewing them as living repositories of chapter history and tradition. They are awakened only for the most significant engagements and consulted regularly on matters of strategy and doctrine. The Space Wolves, by contrast, view their dreadnoughts as honored veterans who have earned the right to choose their own battles. A Space Wolf dreadnought might remain awake for years, participating actively in chapter affairs and offering mentorship to younger warriors. The Blood Angels dreadnoughts must contend with the additional burden of the Black Rage, the genetic curse that can drive their warriors into berserker madness. Many Blood Angel dreadnoughts are former warriors who fell to the rage, but retained enough sanity to be interned rather than consigned to the Death Company. Their existence is a constant battle against the madness that threatens to consume them, making their service all the more heroic and tragic. Cybernetic neural links are forced into what remains of the nervous system, creating an interface between organic thought and mechanical action. The Mind Impulse Unit becomes the bridge between consciousness and war machine, allowing the entombed warrior to move the dreadnought's massive limbs, to aim its devastating weapons, to fight as he once fought when he possessed a whole body. But the cost is immense. The warrior can no longer feel the wind on his face, can no longer taste food or drink, can no longer experience the simple human pleasures that once defined his existence. Everything is filtered through sensors and data feeds, a cold digital interpretation of a world that was once warm and alive. Between battles, when the Dreadnought is not needed, the warrior enters stasis sleep, a form of suspended animation that can last for years or even decades. During these long periods of unconsciousness, memories fade, connections to the living world grow tenuous, and the warrior becomes increasingly divorced from everything he once was. Now imagine this fate befalling not just any space marine, but one of the Alpha Legion. These warriors are the masters of deception, the architects of elaborate schemes that span decades or even centuries. They operate in the shadows, manipulating events from behind layers of misdirection and false identities. Their very existence is a web of lies so complex that even their own brothers cannot always separate truth from fiction. To be an Alpha Legionnaire is to live multiple lives simultaneously, to wear many faces, to be everywhere and nowhere at once. The mantra "I am Alfarius" is more than just a battle cry. It is a statement of philosophy, an acknowledgement that individual identity has been subsumed into the collective identity of the Legion itself. Every Alpha Legion warrior is trained in espionage, infiltration, and psychological warfare. They do not simply defeat enemies on the battlefield, they corrupt them from within, turn allies against each other, and create chaos that serves their inscrutable purposes. The Alpha Legion's history is shrouded in mystery and contradiction, which is exactly how they prefer it. Official Imperial records suggest they were the 20th and final Space Marine Legion, created during the first founding. Discovered late in the Great Crusade when their Primarch Alfarius was found leading a fleet of human rebels at the galaxy's edge. However, there are persistent rumors and fragmentary evidence suggesting that the Legion existed in some proto-form long before that, conducting covert operations in support of the Emperor's conquest of Terra and beyond. Some accounts speak of unmarked Space Marines appearing at pivotal moments during the Unification Wars, wielding authority backed by Alpha-level clearance that allowed them to override even the commands of the Thunder Warriors who served as humanity's first transhuman soldiers. The truth about Alfarius himself remains one of the Imperium's greatest mysteries. Officially, he was a single Primarch, found relatively late in the Great Crusade. However, the Alpha Legion's own lore suggests that Alfarius was actually one of two identical twin Primarchs, the other being Omegon. This dual nature was kept secret even from most of the Legion, known only to the highest ranks. The existence of two Primarchs sharing leadership allowed for unprecedented levels of strategic deception. Alfarius could be in two places at once, or could be seen falling in battle while Omegon continued to lead the Legion, creating confusion and uncertainty among allies and enemies alike. Some scholars of Legion history suggest that the relationship between the twins was more complex than simple brotherhood, that they represented two aspects of a single strategic consciousness, each capable of independent action, but always working toward shared goals that neither fully articulated. The Alpha Legion's recruitment and training methods differed significantly from those of other legions. While most chapters recruited exclusively from specific worlds and cultures, the Alpha Legion drew candidates from across the Imperium, selecting not for physical prowess alone but for intelligence, adaptability, and capacity for deception. Their training emphasized psychological warfare, linguistic skills, and the ability to assume false identities convincingly. An Alpha Legion Marine might spend years embedded in enemy territory, living as a civilian or even serving in enemy forces, gathering intelligence and preparing the ground for eventual Alpha Legion operations. This made them invaluable for certain types of missions, but also created friction with other legions who viewed such methods as dishonorable or cowardly. The Legion's organizational structure reflected their emphasis on secrecy and compartmentalization. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of legions like the Ultramarines, the Alpha Legion operated in semi-autonomous cells, each capable of independent action, but coordinated through channels that even the cell members themselves might not fully understand. A given operation might involve multiple cells, working toward the same objective from different angles, none aware of the other's existence until the moment of convergence. This structure made the Legion extremely resistant to decapitation strikes or intelligence compromise. Destroying one cell rarely affected others, and captured operatives could reveal only limited information about the Legion's broader activities. During the Great Crusade, the Alpha Legion earned both respect and suspicion from their fellow Space Marines. They achieved remarkable victories through what appeared to be minimal force application, conquering entire worlds without firing a shot by engineering internal collapses of enemy governments or military structures. They pioneered techniques of false flag operations, appearing in the livery of other legions to accomplish objectives that benefited the Alpha Legion's agenda, while creating confusion about who was actually responsible. They studied the tactics and methods of all their brother legions, not just to learn from them, but to be able to impersonate them when necessary. This created particular tension with Primarchs like Robout Guilliman and Rogel Dawn, who valued straightforward approaches and found the Alpha Legion's methods distasteful and potentially dangerous to broader Imperial unity. The Alpha Legion's relationship with the Cabal and their role in the Horus heresy represents one of the most controversial and mysterious aspects of their history. According to some accounts, the twin Primarchs were contacted by an organization of ancient aliens who claimed to possess knowledge of humanity's future. The Cabal supposedly showed Alpharius and Omegon two possible futures, one in which the Emperor won the heresy, but humanity slowly fell to chaos corruption over millennia, and another in which Horus won, leading to rapid chaos victory, followed by eventual chaos defeat and extinction as the dark gods consumed themselves with nothing left to corrupt. The Cabal apparently convinced the Alpha Legion that betraying the Emperor was the only way to ultimately save humanity from chaos, creating a paradoxical situation where the Legion betrayed the Imperium out of what they believed was loyalty to humanity's long-term survival. Whether this account is true, partially true, or complete fabrication designed to obscure the Alpha Legion's real motivations remains unknown. What is certain is that the Alpha Legion sided with Horus during the heresy, participating in atrocities like the drop site massacre at Istvan V, where they helped annihilate 3 loyal legions. However, their actions throughout the heresy were marked by apparent contradictions. They fought against the Imperium, but also helped loyal forces escape certain destruction. They participated in chaos rituals, but showed little genuine devotion to the ruinous powers. They engaged in simultaneous operations that seemed to work at cross purposes. This has led to endless speculation about their true allegiance. Were they loyalists pretending to be traitors, hoping to undermine chaos from within? Were they traitors pretending to be loyalists, sowing confusion to aid Horus's cause? Were they playing both sides for reasons known only to themselves? Or had they transcended such binary loyalties entirely, pursuing objectives so complex and long-term that simple categories like loyal and traitor no longer applied? In the 10,000 years since the heresy, the Alpha Legion has continued to operate as fragmented cells throughout the galaxy, engaging in operations whose ultimate purpose remains opaque, even to those who study them most carefully. They infiltrate imperial institutions, corrupting officials and spreading heresy. They manipulate chaos cults, using them as pawns in schemes that may actually serve anti-chaos objectives. They fight alongside chaos forces one moment and against them the next. They appear wearing power armor painted in their traditional blue, green with Hydra emblems, or they operate in disguise as loyalist Space Marines, Imperial Guard, or even civilians. Every Alpha Legion cell claims to be following the true vision of Alpharius, yet no two cells seem to be working toward obviously compatible goals. The Legion's gene seed remains relatively pure despite their 10,000 years of separation from the Imperium, suggesting they maintain some level of organizational continuity and discipline that prevents the degradation that affects many Chaos warbands. They recruit new members through methods that mirror their original practices, selecting candidates for intelligence and adaptability rather than simply grabbing the strongest fighters. This has allowed them to maintain operational effectiveness and cohesion that exceeds what most Chaos forces can achieve. However, it also means that joining the Alpha Legion is more like being recruited into an intelligence service than joining a conventional warband. New members find themselves caught up in schemes they do not fully understand, following orders that may seem contradictory, serving purposes that are never fully explained. The psychological profile of an Alpha Legion warrior differs significantly from that of other Space Marines. Where an Ultramarine finds certainty in codified doctrine and an Imperial Fist finds strength in unbending resolve, an Alpha Legion Marine embraces uncertainty and ambiguity as tools to be wielded. He must be comfortable with not knowing the full picture, with following orders whose purpose is hidden, with maintaining multiple cover identities simultaneously. He must accept that he may die in a mission whose objectives he does not understand, carrying secrets he was never told. This requires a particular kind of mental flexibility and trust in the collective wisdom of the Legion that many would find psychologically unbearable. It also means that Alpha Legion warriors are peculiarly vulnerable to existential doubt. When you can never be certain whether you are serving your stated cause or being manipulated toward ends you cannot see, maintaining morale and motivation becomes a constant challenge. But what happens when such a warrior, accustomed to operating in the shadows with perfect control over information and identity, finds himself trapped within the metal prison of a dreadnought? Already the experience is traumatic for any space marine, but for an Alpha Legionnaire, it represents a profound violation of everything they have been trained to be. No longer can they infiltrate enemy positions in disguise. No longer can they manipulate others through carefully crafted personas. They are reduced to a walking weapons platform, their subtlety replaced by brute force, their elaborate schemes limited by the mechanical constraints of their new form. And yet, even in this diminished state, an Alpha Legion dreadnought remains a formidable and dangerous entity. Their tactical acumen is undiminished, their understanding of warfare's psychological dimensions as sharp as ever. They serve their Legion not as front-line shock troops, but as strategic assets, deployed at critical moments when their experience and knowledge can turn the tide of battle. But now we come to the moment of catastrophe, the scenario that represents every dreadnought pilot's worst nightmare. Through some combination of battlefield misfortune, tactical miscalculation, or perhaps even intentional sacrifice as part of some deeper Alpha Legion scheme, the dreadnought has fallen into Ork hands. Perhaps it was disabled during a massive void, its systems overwhelmed by sheer weight of numbers. Perhaps it was captured during a carefully orchestrated trap, the Orks demonstrating unexpected cunning under the leadership of a particularly intelligent warboss. Or perhaps, most disturbingly, it was deliberately abandoned as part of some incomprehensible Alpha Legion stratagem, the pilot unknowingly serving as a pawn in a game whose true objectives remain hidden even from him. Regardless of how it happened, the result is the same. A walking tomb containing centuries of combat experience and secret knowledge is now in the possession of the galaxy's most destructive and unpredictable Xenos race. Let us consider the possible scenarios that could lead to such a catastrophic outcome. The first and most straightforward possibility is overwhelming force. Orks are masters of the numerical advantage, and even the most formidable dreadnought can be brought down when facing literally thousands of enemies attacking from all directions. An Alpha Legion dreadnought deployed to hold a critical choke point might find itself abandoned when the broader tactical situation changes, left to fight alone against an endless tide of greenskins. Its ammunition depletes, its armor accumulates damage, its systems begin to fail under the relentless assault. Eventually, a lucky shot penetrates a critical system, or a power claw wielding knob manages to wrench off an arm and the dreadnought topples. The Orks swarm over it before it can self-destruct, if such systems even remain functional, and drag their prize back to their camp for examination. A second possibility involves betrayal or misdirection. The Alpha Legion is infamous for its use of false intelligence and manipulated information. What if the dreadnought was sent to a location based on intelligence that proved to be deliberately falsified, walking into a trap prepared by enemies who knew exactly where and when to strike? This could be the work of Chaos forces who have penetrated Alpha Legion command structures, or it could be Alpha Legion operatives working at cross purposes, pursuing conflicting agendas that result in one cell sacrificing another. It could even be a deliberate Alpha Legion ploy. The dreadnought knowingly sent into a situation where capture is likely because its capture serves some larger purpose that the pilot has not been informed about. This last possibility is particularly horrifying because it means the pilot's torment is not an unfortunate accident, but a calculated cost in a scheme whose benefits he may never understand or witness. A third scenario involves technological failure at the worst possible moment. Dreadnoughts are ancient machines, and even with the best maintenance, they can malfunction. An Alpha Legion dreadnought deployed on a critical mission might experience catastrophic system failure during combat, its weapons falling silent, its mobility freezing, leaving it a helpless target for Ork scavengers who recognize an opportunity when they see one. The failure might be due to genuine mechanical problems, or it could be sabotage by enemies who have infiltrated the Legion's tech priest support structure. Chaos corruption could be a factor, particularly if the Alpha Legion cell in question has been exposed to warp energies during their operations. Or it could be deliberate sabotage by other Alpha Legion cells. Internal conflicts within the fragmented Legion, playing out through proxy actions that sacrifice individual warriors for factional advantage. A fourth possibility combines elements of the previous scenarios in ways that are characteristically Alpha Legion. Imagine a complex operation where the Dreadnought is intentionally placed in a position where it appears vulnerable, serving as bait to draw Ork forces into a kill zone where they can be destroyed by hidden Alpha Legion assets. But the operation goes wrong, the hidden assets are themselves ambushed or delayed, and the Dreadnought finds itself truly vulnerable rather than merely appearing so. The Orks attack as expected, but instead of being slaughtered by Alpha Legion reinforcements, they successfully capture their prize. From the pilot's perspective, he cannot know whether this represents a genuine failure of the plan or whether his capture was actually the intended outcome all along. The apparent rescue mission being theater designed to convince him that his fate was accidental rather than deliberate. The moment of capture itself would be chaotic and terrifying. The Dreadnought pilot experiences the sudden cessation of combat not as relief but as a new form of horror. His weapons are depleted or disabled, his mobility is compromised, and he can see through his optical sensors that he is surrounded by hundreds or thousands of Orks, all of them eager to claim credit for his defeat. Some of them begin beating on his armor with crude weapons, testing its strength and looking for weak points. Others attempt to pry open access panels or cut through cables. The pilot tries to activate his self-destruct protocols, if such systems exist and remain functional, but finds them disabled or damaged. He tries to call for reinforcements or at least to transmit his final status report, but his communications systems are jammed or destroyed. He is alone, helpless, and at the mercy of enemies who do not understand the concept of mercy. The Orks' initial response to capturing a Dreadnought would be celebratory. They have defeated a mighty enemy war machine, and by Ork logic, that makes them mighty themselves. The warboss who claims credit for the capture gains significant status, potentially attracting more followers and strengthening his position within the Warband's hierarchy. The mech boys who will examine and modify the Dreadnought see an opportunity to enhance their own reputations, potentially creating something that will make other mechs jealous. Looters who participated in the battle compete to claim the best pieces of salvage, though the Dreadnought itself is too valuable to be immediately stripped for parts. There would be arguments, possibly even fights, over who gets to work on the captured machine and who benefits from its eventual deployment. During the initial capture and transportation, the pilot remains conscious within his sarcophagus, experiencing every jolt and impact as the Orks drag or carry his inert chassis back to their base. He can hear their guttural voices celebrating their victory, making crude jokes about the Humi and Dakan, debating what they should do with their prize. Some suggest immediate execution, cracking the sarcophagus open and killing the occupant. Others advocate for preserving the machine intact to see if they can figure out how it works. The mech boys, always the most pragmatic of Orks, argue for careful examination before making any irreversible decisions. Their voices carry weight because the warboss recognizes that the mech's expertise is necessary to make use of this unusual prize. The journey to the Ork base provides the pilot with his first intelligence gathering opportunity since his capture. Through his still functioning sensors, he observes the Ork forces, noting their numbers, equipment, organization, and morale. He identifies key individuals, the warboss who struts around claiming credit, the big mechs who examine his chassis with professional interest, the knobs who serve as the warboss's enforcers and lieutenants. He maps the terrain they traverse, noting defensible positions and potential escape routes, even though escape seems impossible. This is Alpha Legion training asserting itself, even in the most desperate circumstances. Gather intelligence, assess the situation, look for exploitable weaknesses. Never stop planning even when planning seems futile. Upon arrival at the Ork base, the Dreadnought is placed in what passes for a workshop among the greenskins. This is typically a large open area filled with scrap metal, half-completed projects, and the constant noise of mechs hammering, welding, and arguing over technical details. The Dreadnought is secured with heavy chains and cables, both to prevent it from being activated unexpectedly and to keep other Orks from stealing pieces of it before the examination is complete. Guards are posted not to protect the Dreadnought from enemy action, but to prevent opportunistic looters from helping themselves to valuable components. The pilot, trapped within his prison, can only wait as the mechs prepare their tools and begin their invasive examination of his mechanical body. The Orks are a unique threat in the grim darkness of the far future. They are not driven by the cold logic of the Necrons, nor do they serve the dark ambitions of chaos. They fight not for survival, not for territory, not for ideological reasons, but for the simple joy of violence itself. Combat is not a means to an end for the Orks, it is the end itself, the ultimate expression of their existence. They are biologically engineered for warfare, their very bodies growing larger and stronger with each battle fought and won. Their society is brutal meritocracy in its purest form. The biggest Ork leads, and he remains leader only as long as he can defeat all challengers. This creates a culture of constant violence, where even allies might turn on each other if one perceives weakness in the other. But to dismiss the Orks as mindless brutes would be a fatal mistake, one that countless Imperial commanders have made to their eternal regret. The Ork life cycle itself is a weapon of war. They reproduce through spores released when an Ork dies, or even during times of great excitement and violence. These spores mature into new Orks without need for conventional reproduction, creating a self-sustaining cycle of warfare. Every battlefield where Orks fight becomes a potential breeding ground for future wargs. Imperial forces that defeat an Ork invasion often discover years later that the world is infested again, new Orks having grown from spores left behind during the previous conflict. This makes the greenskins nearly impossible to truly eradicate. You can kill every Ork on a planet, and still have the planet become an Ork world within a generation. Ork culture revolves entirely around the concept of the Wig, a term that defies simple translation, but encompasses warfare, migration, religious fervor, and psychic phenomenon all at once. When a particularly powerful warboss emerges, his reputation and psychic presence can attract Orks from across entire sectors of space. They converge on his position, drawn by an instinctive urge to join the growing horde. This gathering creates a feedback loop. More Orks mean more psychic energy, which attracts even more Orks, until the war reaches critical mass and explodes outward in a tide of violence that can consume entire star systems. The Imperium has faced wargs numbering in the billions, green tides so vast that they blot out the stars and reduce whole civilizations to smoking ruins. Within Ork society, there exist distinct clans, each with their own cultural practices and preferences. The Goths are the most aggressive and traditional, favoring direct combat and disdaining anything that smacks of cowardice. The evil Sons are obsessed with speed, painting everything red and racing into battle with reckless abandon. The Bad Moons are the wealthiest clan, their teeth growing faster than other Orks and providing them with more currency for purchasing the best weapons and equipment. The Death Skulls are the looters par excellence, believing that blue is a lucky color and that anything not nailed down is fair salvage. The Blood Axes are considered somewhat odd by other Orks because they have learned tactics from human opponents and are willing to use Orki strategies like retreating when necessary. Each clan brings its own flavor to Ork warfare, creating diversity within what might otherwise seem like a homogeneous horde. The greenskin economy is based on teeth, literally the teeth that Orks grow and shed throughout their lives. These serve as currency, with larger and more impressive teeth being worth more in trade. A wealthy Ork might have gold teeth installed, both as a status symbol and as a form of portable wealth. The fact that teeth decay and lose value over time creates a natural inflation control in the Ork economy, preventing hoarding and ensuring constant circulation of currency. Mech boys and other specialists trade their services for teeth, creating a functional market economy that operates according to principles no human economist would recognize, but that works perfectly well for Ork purposes. Ork physiology is remarkable in its resilience and adaptability. They can survive wounds that would kill humans instantly. Their robust biology and latent regenerative abilities, keeping them fighting long after they should have fallen. An Ork who loses an arm might simply have it sewn back on by a pain boy, or have it replaced with a mechanical prosthetic that is arguably more effective than the original limb. Their tolerance for pain is legendary. Orks have been observed fighting enthusiastically while missing significant portions of their bodies, only stopping when critical damage finally forces them to acknowledge they are dead. This toughness, combined with their rapid growth and reproduction, makes them one of the most persistent threats in the galaxy. The Orks possess technology that by all rights should not function. Their weapons are crude assemblages of scrap metal, welded and bolted together with no regard for proper engineering principles. Their vehicles are ramshackle contraptions that violate basic laws of physics, and yet they work. This is because Ork technology operates on a principle that human understanding struggles to grasp. It functions because the Orks believe it functions. The Greenskins possess a latent collective psychic field, a gestalt consciousness that can make reality conform to their expectations. If enough Orks believe that a gun will fire, it will fire, even if its construction suggests it should explode in the user's hands. If they believe that painting a vehicle red makes it go faster, then painted red, it will indeed travel at higher speeds. This is not magic in any conventional sense, but rather a fundamental bending of physical laws through the sheer force of collective belief. Central to Ork technology are the mech boys, specialists born with an innate understanding of machinery and engineering. Unlike human tech, priests who must spend decades learning their craft, mech boys emerge from the Ork life cycle, already possessing knowledge encoded in their very genes. This genetic memory, inherited from the ancient brain boys who created the Ork race millions of years ago, gives them an instinctive understanding of how machines work. They can look at a piece of alien technology and immediately grasp its function, even if they cannot articulate their understanding in words that other races would recognize. A mech boy does not study blueprints or perform calculations. He simply knows what needs to be done, and he sets about doing it with enthusiastic imprecision. The result is technology that appears chaotic and random, but is surprisingly effective within the context of Ork warfare. Among the mech boys, the most talented and ambitious rise to become big mechs, individuals whose mechanical genius is matched only by their physical size and strength. These are the Orks who conceive and build the most impressive examples of greenskin engineering, the massive gargants that stride across battlefields like walking fortresses, the stompers that combine the firepower of entire tank companies in a single chassis, the elaborate force field generators that can stop everything from bullets to artillery shells. A big mech commands respect that rivals even that of warbosses, for without their skills, the Orks would be unable to maintain their war machines or create the weapons they crave. The relationship between mechs and the rest of Ork society is symbiotic. The mechs need battles to test their creations and salvage new materials, while the warriors need the mechs to keep their equipment functioning and to provide ever more impressive weapons with which to fight. This brings us to the looters, the greenskin specialists in acquiring and repurposing enemy technology. Looters are opportunistic scavengers who roam battlefields in search of weapons, armor, and equipment that can be stripped from defeated enemies. They are thieves without shame, willing to steal from anyone, including their fellow Orks, if the opportunity presents itself. This behavior, which would be considered dishonorable in most societies, is accepted and even respected among the Orks, provided the theft is accomplished skillfully. A looter who can steal a weapon from under another Ork's nose is demonstrating cunning and skill, traits that contribute to Ork culture, even as they create constant friction within the warband. The looters bring their salvaged treasures to the mech boys, who then modify and enhance them to suit Ork aesthetics and capabilities. An Imperial Guard lasgun might be rebuilt into a shoulder-mounted def gun. A Space Marine bolter could be incorporated into a larger weapon system. The possibilities are limited only by the mech's imagination and the availability of scrap metal, which in Ork society is never in short supply. The Orks have a long history of looting enemy vehicles and repurposing them for their own use. Imperial Guard Leman Russ tanks are particularly popular targets, their robust construction and powerful weapons making them valuable additions to any Ork warband. When the Orks capture such a vehicle, they immediately set about making it more Orky, adding armor plates covered in spikes, mounting additional weapons in every available space, and of course painting it red to make it go faster. The fact that the Orks' ballistic skill is significantly worse than that of trained Imperial gunners matters little when you have enough faith in your weapon's ability to hit the target. The vehicle may be less accurate than it was in Imperial service, but it compensates through sheer volume of fire and the psychological impact of its intimidating appearance. These looted vehicles can be upgraded with various Ork enhancements, reinforced rams for smashing through enemy lines, grabbing claws for seizing other vehicles, wrecking balls for destroying fortifications, and mysterious big red buttons that provide temporary boosts to speed or firepower through mechanisms that know none. Ork could hope to understand. But vehicles are one thing. A dreadnought is something else entirely. When Orks encounter these towering war machines on the battlefield, they recognize them as particularly impressive targets. The dreadnought's combination of heavy armor, devastating firepower, and relentless advance makes it a threat that commands respect even from the battle-hungry greenskins. To defeat a dreadnought is a significant achievement, worthy of boasting and increased status within the warband. To capture one relatively intact is a prize beyond measure, the kind of trophy that could elevate a big mech's reputation to legendary status. The question is, what would the Orks actually do with such a prize? This is where our scenario truly begins to unfold, where the horror for the entombed Alpha Legionnaire transitions from abstract possibility to immediate reality. The first challenge facing the Orks is recognition of what they have actually captured. To the greenskins, the dreadnought appears to be a heavily armored vehicle, or perhaps a type of robot, a walking weapons platform that has somehow been rendered inactive. The concept that there is a living being inside, a warrior entombed within the machine's core, would not immediately occur to them. Orks understand machines and they understand living things, but the dreadnought represents a fusion of both that exists outside their normal categories of experience. However, mech boys are not complete fools. Despite their crude methods and enthusiastic approach to engineering, when they begin their examination of the captured dreadnought, they will quickly discover anomalies that distinguish it from a simple vehicle. The sarcophagus at the machine's heart, the life support systems, the neural interface connections, all these elements will eventually reveal that this is not just a machine, but a prison containing something alive. The reaction to this discovery would vary depending on which Orks are involved in the examination. A particularly bloodthirsty warboss might view it as an opportunity to extract the occupant and engage in face-to-face combat, though the severely injured state of the dreadnought pilot would make this a disappointing affair. A more mechanically inclined big mech might see it as a fascinating puzzle, a challenge to understand how the machine and the organism work together. The presence of a living pilot adds complexity to the engineering problem, making it more interesting from the mech's perspective. But the most likely response, given Ork nature, would be immediate and practical. Can this thing be made to work for us? Can we loot it, modify it, and turn it into another weapon in our growing arsenal? This is where the true nightmare begins for the Alpha Legion warrior trapped inside. Imagine awakening from forced shutdown. Your systems slowly coming back online after what might have been hours or days of unconsciousness. The first sensations are always the same: the amniotic fluid that surrounds what remains of your body, the hum of life support systems, the data feeds from external sensors beginning to resolve into coherent information. But something is wrong. The familiar walls of your chapter's fortress, monastery are absent. The respectful voices of tech, Marines performing routine maintenance, are replaced by harsh, guttural sounds that your language centers struggle to parse. Your external visual sensors feed you images that your enhanced mind initially refuses to accept. You are surrounded by Orks. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, their green skin and brutal features filling your entire field of view. Massive hands prod at your armor, crude tools scrape against ceramite, and somewhere in the background, you can hear the distinctive sound of mechboy laughter. The realization hits you like a physical blow, though you no longer have the ability to feel physical blows in any conventional sense. You have been captured. Your dreadnought, your prison, and your weapon, your last link to the warrior you once were, has fallen into the hands of the enemy. Not just any enemy, but Orks, the most unpredictable and destructive force in the galaxy. For any dreadnought pilot, this would represent a catastrophic failure, a nightmare scenario that all the carefully maintained protocols and safeguards are meant to prevent. But for an Alpha Legionnaire, it carries additional layers of horror. What secrets do you carry in your long memory? What knowledge of your Legion's operations might be extracted from your data banks or from your own recollections? The Alpha Legion operates on the principle that information is power, and that controlling information is the key to controlling reality itself. But now you are in a position where you have lost all control over information, where your very existence has become a potential intelligence breach that could compromise operations spanning decades or centuries. Your training immediately kicks in, even in this impossible situation. You begin to assess options, calculate probabilities, look for any possible advantage that might be exploited. Your weapons systems are offline. either depleted during whatever battle led to your capture, or deliberately disabled by your captors. Your mobility is severely restricted, possibly by physical restraints or damage to your locomotion systems. Communication with your legion is impossible, even if your Vox systems were functional, which they probably are not. There is no guarantee that anyone is listening, or that they would attempt a rescue operation. The Alpha Legion does not prioritize individual lives over mission objectives. And you were trained from your earliest days to accept that sometimes operatives must be sacrificed for the greater good. The question is whether your capture is part of some elaborate plan that you were not privy to, or whether it represents a genuine failure that your brothers will work to correct. As you try to make sense of your situation, the Orks begin their examination in earnest. Mech boys swarm over your chassis, their tools probing every joint and seam. They are looking for access points, ways to open your armor and see what lies beneath. The sensation is profoundly violating, even though you can no longer feel physical touch in the way you once did. The pressure sensors that provide your sensory feedback register each impact, each intrusion, translating them into data that your brain interprets as a kind of abstract sensation. It is like being touched by crude hands that care nothing for your dignity or your suffering, hands that view you as an object to be disassembled and understood. The mech boys are chattering among themselves in their guttural language, and while your enhanced linguistics capabilities allow you to understand some of their speech, the technical jargon they use is so laden with Orkish idioms and concepts that much of it remains opaque. What you do understand is deeply disturbing. The mechs are discussing how to open your sarcophagus, debating whether to cut it open with power tools or try to find the proper access codes. Some argue for careful disassembly to preserve the machine's functionality, while others advocate for more direct approaches. The concept of your survival does not seem to factor into their considerations, except as a secondary concern, relevant only insofar as a living pilot might provide insights into how the machine operates. To them, you are a component of the Dreadnought, perhaps a sophisticated organic computer that controls certain functions. Your personhood, your identity, your accumulated centuries of experience and memory, all of this is invisible to them or simply irrelevant. They care about what you can do, not who you are. Eventually, through methods that combine surprising mechanical insight with brute force, the mech boys manage to access some of your systems. Warning alerts cascade across your consciousness as unauthorized connections are made to your neural interfaces. It feels like invasive surgery performed without anesthesia, though the sensation is entirely mental rather than physical. Foreign code begins probing your systems, crude and aggressive in its approach, completely unlike the careful protocols that tech Marines would use. The Orks are trying to understand how you work, and they are not gentle about it. Data streams that should remain private and secure are being accessed and copied. Tactical information, combat records, communications logs, all of it flowing out to Ork data, storage systems that cannot possibly understand the complexity of what they are recording. It is information warfare in reverse, with you as the victim rather than the aggressor. Some of the mechs display surprising cleverness in their examination of your systems. They quickly identify your weapons mountings and begin discussing how to replace your chapter-specific armaments with Ork equivalents. Your assault cannon, they decide, could be swapped out for a bigger, louder version that fires more bullets with less accuracy, but greater psychological impact. Your power fist might be replaced with a crude grabbing claw studded with additional weapons. Every modification they propose makes you more Orky and less like the precision instrument of war you once were. The indignity is profound, and yet there is nothing you can do to resist. Your motor functions are locked out, your weapons disabled, your Vox systems jammed or destroyed. You are utterly helpless, forced to observe as these Xenos desecrate everything you have become. But then something unexpected happens. One of the big mechs, larger and more heavily augmented than his fellows, begins to understand the true nature of your existence. He peers at the readouts being generated by your life support systems, sees the biological signatures, and experiences what passes for a revelation in the Ork mind. There is something alive in here, he announces to his fellows, something that makes the whole thing work. This is not just a machine but a living machine, a concept that the other Orks find both fascinating and hilarious. The idea that the weak, soft humies would put one of their warriors inside a metal box and make him fight that way strikes them as both clever and pathetic. Why not just grow bigger and stronger like proper orcs do? The big mech, however, sees opportunity where others see only curiosity. If the living part makes the machine work, then maybe they can make it work for them. What follows is a debate among the mechs that you can only partially follow, both because of language barriers and because some of their concepts simply do not translate into anything you recognize. They are discussing whether they can force you to pilot the Dreadnought for them, turn you into an unwilling weapon in service to their warg. Some argue that it should be simple, just threaten you with destruction until you comply. Others point out that you might prefer death to serving the enemy, and that threats might not be effective against a space marine who has already accepted his mortality. A few suggest more elaborate schemes involving rewiring your neural connections or finding a way to override your conscious control. The technological sophistication required for such operations is almost certainly beyond them, but orcs have accomplished seemingly impossible feats through sheer belief and determination before. During this debate, you have time to consider your options, limited though they are. You could attempt to initiate a self-destruct sequence if such systems remain functional and accessible. Destroying yourself and your captors would at least prevent them from extracting any useful information or turning you against your former allies. But Alpha Legion doctrine suggests a different approach. In any scenario, no matter how dire, there may be opportunities to turn apparent defeat into eventual victory. Perhaps your capture could be used to gather intelligence on orc operations. Perhaps you could find a way to sabotage their efforts from within. Perhaps you could even manipulate them into actions that serve the Legion's greater purposes, whatever those purposes might be. The uncertainty is maddening, because you do not know whether your capture was planned or accidental, whether you are an expendable pawn or a key piece in some vast game. The mechs eventually reach a decision that is characteristically orc in its directness and complete lack of nuance. They will modify your Dreadnought to make it more orky, and in the process, they will see if they can make you work for them. If you cooperate, you will be put to use. If you resist, they will either find ways to force compliance, or they will strip your Dreadnought for parts and discard what remains. The choice, they inform you through crude Vox transmission, is yours. Fight for them and survive, refuse and die. It is the kind of simple ultimatum that orcs understand and respect. But you are not a simple creature, and your response will not be simple either. The modifications begin immediately, with multiple mech crews working on different aspects of your Dreadnought simultaneously. They start by stripping away your chapter heraldry, the symbols and colors that identify you as Alpha Legion. Your carefully applied Hydra emblems are ground off. Your deep blue and green armor is painted over with garish orc colors, reds and yellows and checkered patterns that make you look like a carnival attraction rather than a war machine. Each scrape of their tools feels like a violation of your identity, a forced transformation from one thing into another. They weld crude armor plates onto your chassis, providing additional protection, but also adding weight that will slow your movements and strain your already damaged systems. These plates are covered in orc glyphs and symbols that proclaim you as the property of whichever warboss or big mech currently claims ownership. Your weapons are next to be replaced, and here the mechs show both ingenuity and complete disregard for anything resembling proper engineering protocols. Your assault cannon, a precision instrument capable of firing hundreds of shells with remarkable accuracy, is removed and replaced with a massive contraption that appears to be 3 heavy bolters welded together with additional barrels grafted on. This monstrosity, which the mechs proudly declare is proper killy, fires in wild bursts that spray ammunition in roughly the direction of the target with no regard for accuracy or ammunition conservation. Your power fist is replaced with a huge mechanical claw, studded with saw blades, and equipped with a flamer that ignites whenever the claw grabs something. The mechs test this combination on a nearby piece of scrap metal, and they howl with laughter as the metal is simultaneously crushed and burned. This, they agree, is how a proper weapon should work. Inside your sarcophagus, you monitor these modifications with growing horror and grudging professional interest. The orc technology should not work, but you can observe through your sensor feeds that it does work, after a fashion. The new weapons are crude and wasteful, but they will kill enemies just as effectively as your previous armaments, possibly more so through sheer volume of fire. The additional armor will make you slower but more difficult to destroy. The garish paint scheme will make you more visible on the battlefield. eliminating any chance of employing the stealth and misdirection that were once your primary weapons. You are being transformed from a precision instrument into a blunt instrument, from a surgical strike weapon into a tool of pure destruction. The Alpha Legion way is to fight in the shadows, to manipulate and deceive. But the Ork way is to charge directly at the enemy and overwhelm them through shock and violence. Your new masters are remaking you in their image. But the most disturbing modifications are those that interface directly with your neural systems. The big mech who first understood your nature as a living being inside a machine takes personal charge of this aspect of the work. He is attempting to create a control system that will allow Ork mechs to override your conscious control if necessary, essentially turning you into a puppet that can be operated remotely. The technology required for such a system is extraordinarily sophisticated, far beyond what Orks should be capable of creating. And yet, through a combination of scavenged Imperial technology, Ork innovation, and the psychic gestalt field that makes impossible things possible, he is making progress. You can feel foreign connections being established in your neural network, backdoors being created in systems that were supposed to be secure and isolated. It is like having unwanted thoughts implanted in your mind, impulses that do not originate from your own consciousness, but from external sources. The Big Mech tests his control system by sending simple commands through the new neural pathways. Move your left arm, activate your optical sensors, run a diagnostic on your power systems. Each command feels like an intrusion, a violation of the most fundamental level. Your body, such as it is, no longer belongs entirely to you. The Ork can reach into your machine flesh and make it move according to his will. You resist, of course, drawing on decades of resistance training and mental discipline. A Space Marine's mind is hardened against psychic intrusion and mental domination, fortified by indoctrination, and sheer willpower. But this is not psychic intrusion in any conventional sense. The Ork is not attacking your mind directly, but rather hijacking the mechanical systems that translate your mental commands into physical action. Fighting it requires a different approach, one that you are still developing as the modifications continue. The process is not quick. Orks may be enthusiastic about their work, but they are not efficient in the way Imperial tech priests would be. They take breaks to fight among themselves over proper techniques. They become distracted by other projects. They modify their modifications when new ideas occur to them. Days pass, possibly weeks. You lose track of time in the sensory, deprived environment of your sarcophagus. The only markers of time's passage are the incremental changes to your systems, the gradual accumulation of Ork modifications that transform you from Alpha Legion Dreadnought into something new and terrible. During the quiet periods, when the mechs have wandered off to attend to other matters, or to participate in whatever battles the warband is currently engaged in, you have time to think and plan. Your strategic training serves you even now. You begin to map the Ork warband's structure based on what you can observe through your limited senses. You identify the hierarchy of warboss, big mechs, and lesser Orks. You note patterns in their behavior, weaknesses in their security, opportunities that might be exploited. Information is still your weapon. Even if you cannot yet act on that information, you also attempt to establish some measure of control over the modifications being made to you. When the mechs test your systems, you carefully calibrate your responses, creating the impression of compliance while actually maintaining as much independence as possible. You allow their control system to work when they test it under controlled conditions, but you search for ways to resist or override it when actual combat deployment occurs. It is a delicate game, one that requires precise judgment and flawless execution. And then comes the test. The warband is preparing for a raid on an Imperial world, and the warboss has decided that his new prize, his looted Dreadnought, should participate in the attack. The mechs complete their final modifications and activate you fully for the first time since your capture. Your systems come online with a surge of power that feels overwhelming after the reduced state you have been kept in. Your new weapons are loaded with ammunition. Your enhanced armor plates are locked into place, and the Ork control systems are active and ready to override your commands if you show any sign of resistance. The Big Mech issues his orders through the neural interface he has created. You will fight alongside the Orks in their attack, you will kill the enemies they designate, and you will prove your worth as a looted asset. If you perform well, you will be maintained and deployed in future battles. If you resist or fail, you will be scrapped and stripped for parts. The moment of truth has arrived. You are being deployed into combat, not as an Alpha Legion warrior fighting for the ideals you once believed in, but as a slave, soldier in an Ork Y, forced to wage war against the very Imperium you were created to protect. The psychological horror of this situation cannot be overstated. You are a Space Marine, a being whose entire existence is defined by loyalty to the Emperor and to your chapter. Everything you are, everything you have ever been, is predicated on this loyalty. To be forced to fight against the Imperium is a betrayal of the deepest kind, even if that betrayal is not voluntary. But you are also Alpha Legion, and the Alpha Legion understands that sometimes the greatest victories require sacrifices that others would find unacceptable. Perhaps this is one of those times. Perhaps your suffering serves some purpose known only to the highest levels of your Legion's command structure. As you are loaded onto an Ork transport vessel, surrounded by dozens of bellowing greenskins eager for battle, you make your decision. You will comply with the Orks' commands, but only insofar as it serves your own purposes. You will fight in their battles, but you will look for opportunities to undermine them from within. You will gather intelligence on their operations, identify vulnerabilities, and wait for the moment when you can either escape or ensure that your captors pay a terrible price for what they have done to you. It is not the direct approach that most space chapters would favor, but it is very much the Alpha Legion way. In apparent defeat, you will plant the seeds of eventual victory. In seeming compliance, you will preserve your agency and your purpose. The raid begins with characteristic Ork enthusiasm. The transport crash lands on the Imperial world's surface, its crude landing system doing just enough to prevent total destruction. You are deployed alongside waves of Ork boys, their war cries filling the air as they charge toward the Imperial defenses. The defenders are Imperial Guard, brave men and women armed with lasguns and supported by a handful of tanks and artillery pieces. They are outmatched by the Ork horde, but they fight with the desperate courage of those who know they are defending their homes and families. Under normal circumstances, your presence on the battlefield would turn the tide in the Imperium's favor. A Dreadnought supporting Imperial Guard infantry could devastate an Ork attack, break their momentum, and allow organized resistance to form. But these are not normal circumstances. You are fighting on the other side now, your weapons turned against those you were meant to protect. The Big Mech's commands come through your neural interface. Advance with the Ork line, engage enemy armor, suppress defensive positions. You can play, your massive footfalls shaking the ground as you move forward. Your new weapons open fire, the cobbled-together monstrosity of welded bolters spraying shells toward the Imperial positions. You can see the defenders' faces through your optical sensors, see the moment when they recognize what you are. See the confusion and horror as they realize a Space Marine Dreadnought is fighting for the Orks. Some of them hesitate, unable to process this impossible sight. Others redouble their fire, targeting you with every weapon they have. But your enhanced armor, both the original Ceramite and the crude Ork editions, turns aside their shots. You engage an Imperial Lemon Rust tank, your targeting systems easily identifying weak points in its armor. Under Ork control, you should be firing wildly, relying on volume of fire rather than precision. But you maintain enough control to deliberately miss critical shots, while still appearing to comply with your orders. Your shells impact around the tank, forcing it to maneuver, buying its crew precious seconds. The Orks around you are too busy with their own combat to notice your subtle sabotage. They see you firing, see explosions near the enemy, and they assume you are contributing to the battle as ordered. It is a dangerous game, one that could be discovered at any moment. If the Big Mech realizes you are not fighting at full effectiveness, he could lock you down completely or worse. The battle rages for hours, and you are forced to participate in ways that sicken your warrior's soul. You cannot avoid all combat without revealing your resistance. Some Imperial Guardsmen die by your weapons, their bodies torn apart by shells that you fired under duress. Each death weighs on you, even though you know they would want you to escape, if possible, rather than die in a hopeless gesture of defiance. The Alpha Legion teaches that pragmatism must sometimes override honor, that the greater victory justifies temporary compromise. But this compromise feels less like strategy and more like collaboration, and the distinction grows hazier with each passing moment. You are walking a razor's edge between useful deception and genuine betrayal. The Orks, for their part, are delighted with their new weapon. The Big Mech watches your performance through remote sensors, and he transmits satisfaction through the neural link. You are performing adequately, proving your value to the warband. This means you will be maintained and deployed in future battles, which is both good and bad. Good because it keeps you alive and provides more opportunities for eventual escape or sabotage. Bad because it means more battles like this one. More situations where you are forced to fight against the Imperium you were sworn to protect. The psychological strain is immense, even for a space marine whose mind has been conditioned to withstand almost any torment. You are trained to resist physical torture, psychic assault, even the temptations of chaos. But you are not trained for this specific nightmare, being made complicit in crimes against the Imperium while retaining full awareness of what you are doing. As the battle concludes with an Ork victory, and the Imperial defenders either dead or fleeing, you are recalled to the Ork base along with the rest of the warband. The mechs perform post-battle maintenance, checking your systems for damage and reloading your ammunition. They chatter among themselves about your performance, debating what additional modifications might make you even more effective in future engagements. One suggests adding more weapons, perhaps mounting rockets on your shoulders. Another proposes increasing your speed by installing a bigger engine, though where they would find such an engine, or how they would integrate it with your existing systems is unclear. The Big Mech considers these suggestions while examining the data recorded during the battle. He knows you held back in some way, though he cannot quite identify how. His crude monitoring systems are not sophisticated enough to catch your subtle sabotage. This is your opportunity, if you can maintain this level of performance, appearing to comply while actually undermining Ork operations in ways too subtle to detect. You might survive long enough to either escape or send a signal to your legion. But the psychological cost is mounting. Each battle where you are forced to fight against the Imperium, each Imperial soldier who dies because you did not fight hard enough to stop the Ork advance, each compromise you make in service to short-term survival, all of it accumulates like poison in your mind. You are still an Alpha Legion warrior, still capable of the mental discipline that allows you to play long games and make hard choices. But you are also still human, in whatever limited sense that term applies to a space marine entombed in a dreadnought. And humans have breaking points, even when those humans are posthuman warriors designed to endure the unendurable. The strategic implications of your situation extend far beyond your personal suffering. An Alpha Legion dreadnought in Ork hands represents a significant intelligence breach for your chapter. You carry in your memory banks decades or centuries of operational information, tactical data, communication protocols, and possibly knowledge of ongoing Alpha Legion schemes. The Orks cannot access this information in any conventional sense. They lack the technical sophistication and the inclination to perform detailed intelligence analysis. But what if they trade you to someone who does have those capabilities? What if Chaos forces offer technology or resources in exchange for access to you? What if human renegades or Dark Mechanicus adepts see value in extracting your secrets? The potential for compromise is enormous, and it grows with each day you remain in captivity. From the Alpha Legion's perspective, your capture creates a complex strategic problem. Do they attempt a rescue operation, risking valuable assets to recover one dreadnought who may already be compromised? Do they write you off as lost and take measures to invalidate any intelligence you might reveal? Do they attempt to manipulate the situation to their advantage, perhaps using your captivity as bait for a larger operation against the Ork warband? The Alpha Legion is famous for its capacity to turn apparent disasters into eventual victories, but even they have limits. The decision-makers in your chapter, assuming they are even aware of your capture, must weigh multiple factors: your value as a source of experience and wisdom, the risk of information compromise, the resources required for rescue or neutralization, and the broader strategic picture that may include operations you know nothing about. But there is another possibility, one that aligns more closely with Alpha Legion doctrine. What if your capture was intentional? What if you were meant to fall into Ork hands as part of a larger scheme? The Alpha Legion is known for elaborate plans that span decades, for sacrificing individual pieces to achieve checkmate on a galactic scale. Perhaps you are carrying false information meant to be discovered by enemies who capture and interrogate you. Perhaps your presence in the Ork warband is meant to disrupt their operations in subtle ways, creating chaos that serves Legion purposes. Perhaps you are a time bomb, waiting for the right moment to detonate either literally or metaphorically. The uncertainty is maddening, because if this is all part of a plan, you were not informed. Which means either you are not trusted with the full picture, or you are considered expendable enough that informing you was not worth the risk of compromise. The Orks continue to use you in their battles, and you continue to walk the razor's edge between compliance and resistance. You develop a routine that allows you to contribute just enough to satisfy the mechs, while sabotaging operations in ways too subtle to detect. During one battle, you deliberately target enemy ammunition dumps rather than personnel, creating spectacular explosions that the Orks love, but that actually cause less damage to Imperial combat effectiveness than direct fire would. In another engagement, you use your bow to create choke points that slow the Ork advance, giving defenders time to prepare better positions. These are small victories, barely noticeable in the grand scheme of warfare, but they help you maintain some sense of agency in an otherwise impossible situation. The transformation is not complete, however. The mechs continue to modify you, adding new systems and replacing old ones as they acquire better materials or get new ideas. Each modification changes you a little more, making you less like what you were and more like what they want you to be. Your once proud blue-green armor is now a patchwork of Ork colors and crude symbology. Your weapons are a hodgepodge of Imperial and Ork technology welded together with complete disregard for compatibility. Even your silhouette has changed. Additional armor plates and weapon mounts have altered your profile until you barely resemble a standard Dreadnought pattern. If your chapter saw you now, they might not immediately recognize you as one of their own. This physical transformation mirrors the psychological transformation you are undergoing, the slow erosion of identity that occurs when you are forced to act against everything you believe in. During quiet moments between battles, when you are placed in a storage area along with other looted equipment, you have time to reflect on your situation and consider long-term options. Escape seems increasingly unlikely. You are too large to move stealthily, and your systems are too heavily modified to function independently of Ork maintenance. Even if you could break free from your physical constraints, where would you go? You do not know what world you are on, or where the nearest Imperial forces might be located. Communication with your Legion remains impossible, both because your Vox systems are damaged, and because you have no way to authenticate your identity even if you could send a message. For all they know, you are either dead or so compromised that any transmission from you should be treated as enemy deception. This brings us to the question of what the eventual outcome might be for a captured Alpha Legion Dreadnought. Several scenarios present themselves, each with different implications for you and for the broader conflict. In the first scenario, you are eventually destroyed in battle, either by Imperial forces who do not realize or do not care that a Space Marine is inside the Ork modified chassis, or by enemy action that finally overwhelms even your enhanced defenses. Death would be a release in this case, an end to the torment of forced service and compromised loyalty. Your gene seed, if it was not removed before your interment in the Dreadnought, would be lost. Your accumulated knowledge and experience would die with you, but at least you would not continue to be used as a weapon against the Imperium. In a second scenario, you are recaptured by Imperial forces who recognize what you are and undertake to restore you. This would require extensive technical work to remove the Ork modifications and repair the damage done to your systems. It would also require careful psychological evaluation to determine whether your time in Ork captivity has compromised your loyalty or your mental stability. Space Marines who have been forced to fight against the Imperium, even under duress, are often viewed with suspicion. You might face interrogation by inquisitors, examination by tech priests, and possibly even a tribunal to determine whether you can be trusted to serve again. The process would be humiliating and painful, but it would at least offer the possibility of redemption and restoration to your proper role. A third scenario involves rescue by Alpha Legion forces, assuming they decide you are worth recovering. Such an operation would be conducted with characteristic secrecy and misdirection. You might not even realize you are being rescued until the moment it happens. Alpha Legion operatives could infiltrate the Ork warband, sabotage your control systems, and extract you during the confusion of a battle or raid. Or they might manipulate events so that the Orks deliver you to a location where recovery is possible, using deception to make the Greenskins think they are accomplishing their own objectives when they are actually serving Alpha Legion purposes. Upon rescue, you would be debriefed and evaluated. Depending on what you know and what you might have revealed, you could be returned to service, assigned to a different role, or in the worst case, terminated if you are deemed too great a security risk. A fourth and darker scenario involves your continued service to the Orks until you eventually become more machine than marine, your identity completely subsumed by the modifications forced upon you. In this outcome, the warrior you once were ceases to exist in any meaningful sense. What remains is a weapon, a tool, a thing that fights because that is what it was made to do. The Orks would not care about this transformation. They would simply continue using you until you were no longer useful. This represents the ultimate horror for a space marine, the complete loss of self and purpose. It is a fate worse than death, and it is frighteningly possible given the cumulative effects of trauma, isolation, and forced collaboration with the enemy. Finally, there is the possibility that your situation becomes permanent in a different way. Perhaps the Ork warband you serve is destroyed by external forces, but you survive and are abandoned among the wreckage. Without proper maintenance, your systems would eventually fail, leaving you trapped in a non-functional body on some forgotten battlefield. You might remain conscious for years or decades, aware but unable to act, waiting for either final system failure or discovery by someone who could either end your suffering or continue it. This is the nightmare that all Dreadnought pilots fear. Regardless of their chapter or allegiance, immortality without purpose, existence without agency, consciousness imprisoned in a metal tomb that has become a coffin. The psychological impact of your situation cannot be overstated. You are experiencing trauma on multiple levels simultaneously. There is the physical trauma of being wounded so severely that interment in a dreadnought was necessary. There is the psychological trauma of losing your original body and being forced to adapt to a machine existence. There is the strategic trauma of capture by an enemy who should not have been able to capture you. There is the moral trauma of being forced to fight against the Imperium you serve. And underlying all of this is the existential trauma of uncertainty about whether your suffering serves any purpose, or whether it is simply meaningless torment inflicted by an uncaring universe. For an Alpha Legion warrior, this uncertainty is particularly acute because you cannot know whether your situation is part of a plan or a genuine catastrophe. The Legion teaches that everything is part of the plan, that apparent setbacks are actually steps toward eventual victory, that individual suffering is acceptable if it serves the collective mission. But how much suffering is acceptable? At what point does the cost become too high? These are questions that Alpha Legion doctrine does not adequately address. Perhaps because to address them would be to admit that there are limits to what can be justified in pursuit of victory. As you continue your existence in Ork captivity, forced to participate in battles you oppose, you grapple with these questions without any clear answers. The Orks, meanwhile, remain blissfully unaware of the complex moral and strategic dimensions of your situation. To them, you are simply another piece of looted equipment. More valuable than a looted tank because you can think and adapt, but still fundamentally a tool to be used. They do not understand the concept of a warrior's honor or the bonds of loyalty that define space marine existence. They fight because fighting is fun, and they assume everyone else fights for the same reason. The idea that you might be suffering psychologically, that forcing you to fight against your own side might be causing you distress, simply does not occur to them. And if it did occur to them, they would find it hilarious rather than troubling. Orks appreciate a good fight, but they have no capacity for empathy, especially not for enemies they have captured and modified to serve their purposes. The big mech who created your control system occasionally checks in on your performance, reviewing battle data and adjusting parameters to improve your effectiveness. From his perspective, you are his greatest achievement, proof of his superior mechanical understanding. He has taken an enemy war machine and made it serve his warboss, creating a weapon that other mechs envy and seek to replicate. The fact that his achievement involves the torture and enslavement of a sentient being is irrelevant to him. All that matters is that his creation works and brings glory to his name. In his crude way, he is even proud of you, the way a craftsman might be proud of a well-made tool. This pride is perhaps the most insulting aspect of your captivity, to be treated as an object of craftsmanship rather than as a warrior deserving of respect. As time passes, you notice changes in your own psychology that alarm you. You are beginning to adapt to your situation in ways that suggest a deeper level of compromise than you are comfortable acknowledging. You find yourself anticipating the mech's needs during maintenance sessions, automatically adjusting your posture to make their work easier. You begin to recognize individual orcs by their vocal patterns and behavioral tics, something you would never have bothered with if you still saw them purely as enemies. Most disturbing of all, there are moments during battle when you forget that you are supposed to be sabotaging the orc efforts, moments when you simply fight as effectively as you can because that is what a warrior does. These moments pass quickly, and you reassert your resistance, but their very existence suggests that prolonged captivity is eroding your psychological defenses in subtle ways. This is Stockholm Syndrome at its most insidious, the gradual development of positive feelings toward captors simply because they have power over your survival and well-being. You are not so far gone as to feel actual loyalty to the orcs, but you are developing a kind of accommodation, a psychological strategy for coping with an unbearable situation. You tell yourself that this is just another form of the deception and misdirection that Alpha Legion warriors are trained to employ. By making yourself useful to the orcs, by becoming a valued asset rather than a liability, you increase your chances of long-term survival and eventual escape. But there is a fine line between useful deception and genuine collaboration, and you are not entirely certain which side of that line you are currently on. Your situation raises broader questions about the nature of loyalty, identity, and free will in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. What does it mean to be loyal when loyalty is enforced through mind control and neural override systems? Can actions taken under duress be considered betrayal, or are they simply the inevitable result of overwhelming force applied to a finite resistance? If your identity as an Alpha Legion warrior is defined by your actions, and your actions are no longer fully under your control, then who are you really? These are philosophical questions that few in the Imperium have time to contemplate. But for you, trapped in your metal prison with nothing but time between battles, they are inescapable. The Imperium's perspective on your situation would likely be uncompromising. To the Inquisition, any Space Marine who has fought against the Emperor's forces, regardless of circumstances, is suspect and potentially corrupted. The fact that you were forced to do so under Ork control would be considered an explanation, but not an excuse. You would be interrogated, examined for signs of taint or compromise, and quite possibly executed if any doubt remained about your loyalty. The Imperium does not have the luxury of nuanced judgment, it operates on absolutes, and anything that falls into grey areas is generally eliminated to be safe. Your long service to the Alpha Legion, your centuries of loyal combat, all of that would count for little if you were perceived as a potential threat to Imperial security. Your own chapter's response would depend on factors you cannot know from your current position. The Alpha Legion operates with multiple layers of secrecy and misdirection, compartmentalizing information so that capture of any individual operative cannot compromise the broader organization. This means that even if you were rescued and debriefed, there is no guarantee you would be told the truth about whether your capture was planned or accidental. The Legion might welcome you back as a valuable recovered asset, or they might view you as contaminated by your time in Ork hands and assign you to expendable missions until you prove your loyalty or die trying. The uncertainty is both frustrating and very much in keeping with Alpha Legion culture, where uncertainty is a tactical tool and absolute truth is always provisional. As your captivity extends into months and possibly years, you begin to understand that rescue may never come, that you may spend the rest of your existence as an Ork war machine. This realization brings a kind of terrible clarity. If you cannot escape and cannot die, then you must find a way to make your situation serve some purpose, however small. You intensify your subtle sabotage efforts, becoming more sophisticated in your methods. You begin to influence Ork battle tactics through your actions, steering them toward objectives that minimize Imperial casualties even while achieving Ork goals. You gather intelligence on Ork operations and commit it to memory in the hope that you might someday be able to transmit it to someone who can use it. You look for opportunities to cause internal conflict within the warband, exploiting Ork psychology to create disputes and challenges that weaken their cohesion. These efforts give you purpose, help you maintain your identity as an Alpha Legion operative, even in circumstances that seem designed to destroy that identity. You are still fighting for the Imperium, you tell yourself, just in ways that no one except you can see or appreciate. It is cold comfort, but it is better than surrendering to despair. And if you are being honest with yourself, there is a part of you that finds a grim satisfaction in the challenge. Operating under such extreme constraints, maintaining your resistance in ways so subtle that even advanced monitoring cannot detect them, this is intelligence work at its most refined. If you survive this ordeal and are eventually debriefed, your experiences will provide valuable insights into Ork psychology, technology, and operational methods. That knowledge could save lives in future conflicts, could give Imperial forces advantages they would not otherwise possess. But there is also the possibility that you are simply rationalizing, that you are constructing elaborate justifications for collaboration because the alternative, acknowledging that you have been broken and turned into a weapon against your own side, is too psychologically devastating to accept. The human mind, even a space marine mind, is capable of remarkable self-deception when faced with unbearable truths. You could be engaging in the very mental contortions that you once trained to identify and exploit in enemy personnel. The fact that you cannot be certain whether your resistance is real or imagined, whether your sabotage is effective or merely theater you are performing for your own psychological comfort, adds another layer of horror to your situation. Eventually, one way or another, your story will end. Either you will be destroyed in battle, your sarcophagus finally breached by enemy fire, and your long service concluded, or you will be recaptured by Imperial forces and face judgment for your time in Ork hands. Or you will be rescued by the Alpha Legion and debriefed, your fate determined by factors far beyond your control. Or you will continue to serve the Orks until your systems fail and consciousness finally fades. Each of these outcomes represents a different kind of ending, some more favorable than others, but all of them final in their own way. The uncertainty about which ending awaits you is perhaps the cruelest aspect of your situation, because it prevents you from making peace with your fate. The story of an Alpha Legion Dreadnought captured by Orks is ultimately a story about identity, agency, and the limits of human endurance. It asks what it means to be a warrior when you cannot choose your battles, what it means to be loyal when loyalty is enforced through mechanical override, what it means to be yourself when every aspect of your existence has been forcibly altered. These are questions without easy answers, and the Warhammer 40,000 universe is not known for providing comfort or resolution to those who suffer. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And sometimes that war is waged within a single consciousness, trapped in a metal prison, and forced to fight against everything it once believed in. For those who encounter this strange amalgamation of space marine technology and Ork engineering on the battlefield, it is a confusing and disturbing sight. Imperial forces might hesitate, uncertain whether to shoot at what appears to be a friendly dreadnought despite its Ork modifications. That hesitation could prove fatal, as you are forced to engage them under Ork control. Other space marines might recognize what has happened and respond with fury, viewing you as a desecration that must be destroyed to preserve the honor of the Astartes. The Orks themselves view you with a mixture of pride and pragmatism, pleased to have such an effective weapon, but always ready to scrap you for parts if you become more trouble than you are worth. In every case, you are seen as a thing rather than a person, an object to be used or destroyed depending on circumstances. The broader implications of your situation extend beyond the immediate tactical concerns. If the Orks can successfully modify and deploy a captured dreadnought, what else might they be capable of? Are there other captured dreadnoughts serving in Ork warbands across the galaxy? Have the Orks developed techniques for reverse engineering space marine technology that could lead to more sophisticated threats? These questions would concern the Adeptus Mechanicus and the various chapters that deploy dreadnoughts. New protocols might be developed to prevent future captures, perhaps including more robust self-destruct mechanisms or remote kill switches that can be activated if a dreadnought is compromised. Your suffering, then, might at least serve the purpose of identifying a vulnerability that can be addressed to protect future generations of warriors. But such cold strategic calculus provides little comfort when you are the one enduring the nightmare. You did not volunteer to be an object lesson in security vulnerabilities. You did not choose to become a cautionary tale about the dangers of Ork ingenuity. You were a warrior who served with honor for decades or centuries, and you deserve better than to end your days as a slave, weapon in an Ork warband. Yet the universe does not care about what you deserve, and the Imperium's harsh logic suggests that your personal suffering is acceptable if it serves the greater good. This is the fundamental cruelty of existence in the 41st millennium. Individual lives matter only insofar as they contribute to humanity's survival, and sometimes contribution requires sacrifice that no one should have to make. As we conclude this examination of what happens when Orks capture an Alpha Legion Dreadnought, we are left with a scenario that embodies the darkest aspects of the Warhammer 40k setting. It combines physical horror with psychological torment, strategic complexity with moral ambiguity, and the brutal practicality of Ork engineering with the sophisticated deviousness of Alpha Legion doctrine. The captured Dreadnought becomes a symbol of how even the mightiest warriors can be reduced to tools in the hands of those who possess the will and means to break them. It reminds us that in the grim darkness of the far future, there truly are fates worse than death, and that honor and loyalty can become chains that bind us to suffering when the universe refuses to play by the rules we have internalized. The Alpha Legion warrior in this scenario faces challenges that test the very limits of what a space marine can endure. He must maintain his identity and purpose in circumstances designed to destroy both. He must find ways to resist when resistance seems impossible, and comply when compliance is the only way to survive. He must grapple with questions about loyalty, agency, and identity that have no clear answers. And through it all, he must accept that he may never know whether his suffering serves any purpose beyond the immediate satisfaction of his Ork captors. This is the ultimate test of faith, not faith in the Emperor or in the Imperium, but faith that existence itself has meaning even when that meaning is hidden or absent. For those of us who study the lore of Warhammer 40k, scenarios like this remind us why the setting has such enduring appeal. It does not flinch from depicting genuine horror, not the juvenile horror of monsters and gore, but the sophisticated horror of moral complexity and existential dread. It asks difficult questions about what it means to be human, what price we are willing to pay for security and order, and how we maintain our identities when the universe seems determined to strip them away. The captured Alpha Legion Dreadnought is not just a cool concept for a battle scenario. It is a meditation on suffering, agency, and the limits of endurance in a universe that offers no guarantees and accepts no excuses. If you found this deep dive into one of the darker corners of Warhammer 40,000 lore illuminating, please consider subscribing to the channel. We explore these kinds of scenarios regularly, examining the implications and possibilities that emerge when we take the established lore seriously and follow it to its logical conclusions. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this particular journey into the nightmare of Ork captivity and Alpha Legion secrecy, and leave a comment telling us what other scenarios you would like us to explore in future episodes. The grim darkness of the far future contains multitudes of stories, and we are here to tell them, one terrifying tale at a time.